Hello men, and welcome to part 7 of my tutorial series on preparing for and then finally building the wooden wing ribs for the old-time Corben Cabin Ace. Now, if you've been following this series, you should be about ready to start building ribs. So I'll cut short the old preamble so that we can commence straight away. Now, the previous 6 videos in this series have brought us up to the point of proving our jig and our templates. Everything we need to know has been covered to the extent of my ability to cover it and remember what we need to cover. But this brings us up to this point, and we can now remove our templates from the jig, and in lieu of a lot of yakking, I'll just simply start building. And as the need arises, I will explain certain details, and I'll try to cover those details quickly. Otherwise, we'll just go forward with the idea that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and in this case, a video. Now, don't omit this next step. It's very important. The cap strips, when they come from the supplier, they've got a little bit of fuzz on them. So you can build a sanding board like this. It's a great little tool, and it will help you immensely with a lot of little jobs like this. Now we're just knocking the fuzz off, boys. Our top cap strip template. Bottom cap strip. Paying particular attention to our grain direction. Got to really put a little force to shove it up into that pocket. Very nice. One. We're just going to go along and lay out using our templates each one of our verticals and diagonals. And we'll take it to the bandsaw and cut them out and then sand them in. Now once we prove all of these templates and we get our proof of jig rib pulled out of here, then we'll go along and lay out every one of our templates on our pieces of wood, 30 pieces for each upright and diagonal, and we'll cut them all out and put it on an assembly line, and you'll just be able to knock ribs out 2 a day, 3 a day if you feel like it. So for planning purposes, when you're ordering your material, you can figure 3 6-foot 1/4 inch pieces per rib. We're only going to cut out and install a couple of these on camera. Anything more is just redundant. Now, you've seen me do this on previous videos, so, you know, to just keep showing it over and over again is wasting your time and mine. So I'll just do a few and then we'll go on about other stuff. Try as hard as you can, fellas, to miter all of your verticals and diagonals to get as perfect a fit as you possibly can. It not only makes the rib stronger, but it's a matter of personal pride also. You know, if your airplane winds up in a museum 75 years, 80 years from now, and it's being restored there, you want those technicians doing the restoration to take that fabric off and say, good gravy, this guy knew what he was doing. So let's see if we can get a fit here. Oh yeah. Very nice, very nice. Oh yes. I'm getting lucky. Sometimes you'll be going back and forth to that sander plenty of times. Well, I'll be doggone, look at that. So they all wound up fitting pretty doggone nice. Okay, the rest off camera. Let's knock the high spots down. Alright, gusset time. Okay men, we're just about ready to put our gussets on one side. We've got everything cut out. Now there is something I wanted to show you on the front and rear spars as far as the gussets go, and let's mosey on back there and take a look. Now on these spar cutouts, you're going to use half gussets. And so you're going to make your templates. You will custom fit those templates. Both the front and the rear spar, and back here on the false spar. So we'll just take a regular gusset and put that on there, and of course mark it with a pencil and then cut it out. Of course you know how to do that. I don't have to be telling you boys how to do that. But before we get started, let's have a general discussion on glue, nails, and the tools we're going to need. Of course, this probably goes without saying for a lot of you more experienced builders out there, but for the guy that's just starting out, you know, he's usually just loaded with questions. And that's why I took the time to make, you know, this 7-part series. It may even run into 8 parts on every step you need to take to build a rib. Because sometimes when you first start out, as some of you guys know, and maybe have forgotten, if you're just starting out, you need all the help you can possibly get. And it's a learning process. It's an educational process. So, of course, we're going to need our handy number 2 pencils. We're going to need a 6-inch scale. We're going to need a pair of hemostats. You can get those hemostats at Harbor Freight. You're going to need your tack hammer. I've had that tack hammer probably 38, 39, 40 years. It's my favorite. That thing is built probably, I don't even know how many wings. A lot. Okay, we're going to get a pound of 1/4-inch nails. These nails are brass plated. I don't know if we can see that nail. Let me see if I can get a close up here. That nail is brass plated. It's a steel nail, brass plated, and cement coated. You get it at Aircraft Spruce. They're pretty reasonably priced. So you're going to need your sanding blocks. And then, next up, we're going to get to the most controversial matter, and that is glue. Now, if you really want to get into an argument with a typical home builder that's building with wood, just start talking about the glue. Back in my day, back in the very early 70s, the glue to use was weldwood plastic resin glue. And I built a couple of wings out of that. My first airplane, the wings were built using weldwood plastic resin glue. That's the first airplane I built. Put about 500 hours on it, and in a moment of weakness I sold it, and I wish I hadn't have. Of course, the FAA now says that weldwood plastic resin glue is not an acceptable glue. You can use, and I would not suggest using the weldwood plastic resin glue. I hated it. It was brittle. I just hated it. Now some people may love it, and that's okay, but no, not me. Not anymore. And there are probably hundreds of airplanes still flying from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s that use that glue. You can use the weldwood Resorcinol glue. I think some of the Resorcinol glues in the boating industry are pretty good. Probably not FAA approved. I would have to look into that. Of course, there's Type Bond 2 or Type Bond 3. Now, again, back in the day, I know of probably 5 airplanes that were built back in the early 70s and up through the 80s that were built with the regular Type Bond aliphatic glue. This was before Type Bond 2 and certainly way before Type Bond 3 Ultimate. And those airplanes are still flying, not FAA approved, but you know, it's been used, and those airplanes are still flying. I flew one not too long ago. The wings are glued together with that stuff. Now, the Type Bond 2 was a step better in the line of aliphatics, and Type Bond 3, the newest, the ultimate wood glue they call it, rated by the pros, exterior and interior. However, they do give you a caveat. They say do not use it for structural purposes. And that sounds like to me they're trying to backtrack and get out of any liability. Personally, you know what? I would not hesitate to use that Type Bond 3 unless I was building, let's say, a pit special or a seaplane. Now, don't go out and buy it and use it on my say-so. You are ultimately the one that has to make up your mind about what you want to do here. The aliphatic glues are a lighter glue because you know, it depends on evaporation for curing, and of course that liquid in there evaporates out and you get a lighter glue joint. Now, everybody in the home building community seems to be just gaga over T88. And, you know, T88's it's hard to deny. It's a good glue. That's what I'm going to use here. It's expensive. Terribly expensive. But I'm going to go ahead and use it on this airplane because, well, just because. But you got to remember that every bit of that T88 that you put on that airframe, that weight is there to stay. Once it's cured, the weight you put in is the weight you wind up with. It relies on a chemical reaction to cure. And so it's a heavier glue than the Tide Bond or the Weldwood plastic resin, and probably the Weldwood resorcinol too. So you pay your money and you take your chances. For me, any of these glues here would work for me personally. For you, make up your own mind. Don't take my advice. You do your own research, and I am not responsible for anyone going out and using a particular glue and it not working for them. So just remember, buyer beware. Since I'm using epoxy glue, I'm going to use these nitrile gloves. Epoxy is sticky stuff, and it gets all over the place. And some people they're allergic to epoxy glues, so you don't have to have that unless you're allergic or unless you just don't want the glue sticking all over your fingers. You're going to need plenty of paper towels, plenty of 91% isopropyl alcohol, and plenty of Q-tips. Okay, before we go along and start gluing our gussets in, we're going to come beforehand and we're going to wipe all of the residual sawdust off of every one of these joints. We're going to use a alcohol damp paper towel. You don't want it sloshing wet, just damp. So I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of these off camera, but don't omit that part. You'd be surprised at how much sawdust you can get on there. I don't know if you can see that. That dirt, that sawdust residue on there. And that will interfere with your glue joint, fellas. Now, before we mix up our epoxy, we've got to remember that we're working on a time limit with the epoxy. So we want to have everything, we want to have all of our ducks in a row before we start mixing up glue, because that stuff is so expensive you don't want to waste any. So what we'll do is go along and line up each and every one of our gussets exactly where we want them. We'll mark them with our pencil. We'll take one of those baby nails there, 1/4 inch. Now some of them have flashing on them, but that'll come right off. Okay, we're going to figure out exactly where we want that. We're going to drive a pilot nail. Okay, now what that does, that does two things for us. When we take it off and put our glue on here, then we can put this back in there and line it up with that hole and drive that baby home, and we don't have the gusset trying to slide over here and yonder and going into the next county. And believe me, they tend to do that. We'll do one more on camera here, and then I'll do the rest off camera. Okay, there we have it. So we'll go right on down the line, men, and get this rib prepared to glue the gussets on. Now, one little tip I forgot to tell you about a while ago is when you line your gussets up, have the top of your gusset just below your cap strip. Now that's going to save you a lot of sanding and aggravation later on, trying to get that flashing off the top. So try to line it up with it just below. Of course, after we get the thing glued in, we're still going to have a tremendous amount of sanding to go. You'll see as we go along. Whoops. Now, another additional thing is line up your gussets to where they look, halfway symmetrical on there. You don't want them to look like they're just put on, half-assed, pardon the French. There we go. So that looks pretty good there. Okay, it's about time to start gluing our gussets on. Boy, this T88 is some sticky stuff. It gets everywhere too. Okay, and then as soon as you get that nailed down, get your alcohol rag and clean up that squeeze out. Now, you may be wondering, why we're not taking the cap strips out and buttering the ends and the verticals and all of that, and buttering the ends here and here. You don't need to do that. Hydraulic action will shove that glue right down into the joint. Because once you've seen this, you've seen it all. You know, once you've seen one gusset put on, it's just unnecessary to go along and show more. And as it is, on each one of these episodes, I'm winding up with about 6 hours of video that I have got to edit down into a 30-minute video suitable for YouTube. Now, they used to let me put on longer videos, but they don't anymore for some reason. I don't know why. So I've got to edit 6 hours of video down into 30 minutes. And I'm trying to learn how to be brief, how to get the point across, you know, with as little video footage as I have to take. Oops, if that makes any sense. I love it when we get to this point, start gluing and nailing.